Hi everybody, my name is Jennifer DiMarco and I am one of the authors who participated in the Trinity Project in 2019. So for this project we had, let's see, the cover says radically different authors, and that's definitely true. We had 9 authors, all walks of life, all ages, all different places in their careers. Each of us received the same prompt on the first day of the month, and then we had that month to write a short story that was 5,000 to 20,000 words, so huge range. And we didn't have to use, actually we were encouraged not to use the actual prompt in our story, but to literally just take the prompts as a place of inspiration. I think some of us took that more seriously than others. I think some of us, we already had a story in our mind and we were like, yeah, that fits with the prompt. I personally really tried to listen to the prompts and let the prompt itself inspire me. And now what is happening in 2020 is 12 different volumes of Trinity are being released, one every month. And in January, we released Trinity January, which has all 9 of the stories written from the January prompt. And I am going to read to you today from my story and then talk to you a little bit about it. So the prompt for January was, the night was bleak and biting, like only the middle of the winter can be, and the sky cluttered with stars was wide and cloudless. It was as if the moment was frozen, preserved for posterity by some unseen and all-powerful force that knew what was to come. Now, I'm just a human being, and I think one of the cool and interesting things about writers is that we often have a larger vocabulary when we're writing than the vocabulary we're comfortable with reading aloud. So I apologize already if I've already slaughtered words and said them in the wrong way. I am not going to fixate on that. I am going to try to just focus on my story. And my story for January, inspired by that prompt, was called Hannah at Night. And I'm Jennifer DiMarco, which I think I've already said. And actually, before I dive into this, I should probably also throw out that all of the authors who worked with the Trinity Project that have decided to come in or have the ability to be able to come in, because all of these episodes of the Trinity stories being read are going to be unedited. So we're trying to create as much as possible the experience of you being at a live reading. So this file will be completely unedited. If I stumble, if I have to go back, anything like that, none of that is going to be edited out. I want you guys to feel like you're in the room with me, like a great bookstore, and you've come in and I'm reading right to you guys. Okay, now I'll try to dive in. You can tell I'm a little nervous, you guys. Hannah at Night. All you have to do is write one true sentence. Just one. Not a million words, not new words, just your words. You'll know it's real because it won't be easy, it won't be painless. It may not even be pretty or lyrical, but rather devoid of all alliteration and destitute of charm. But it will be the truth. And in the end, your end, my end, the end of us all, that will be the thing that people remember. That will be the moment, indelible on the black papyrus of the sky, that burns like a new constellation, intimate and universal and beyond everything else, true. I loved Hannah, but only at night. I think that might be my sentence. She said things like that, quoting Hemingway or Whitman or Angelou or Sarton, usually without knowing it, usually just proving the adage that the same stories are told, the same advice is given over and over again. That's what made me fall headlong into her midnight of discontent. Those times when she'd lean back, exhaling an ethereal cloud of blue haze and dispense the wisdom of the ages, the cumulative knowing and doing of seemingly every sage before her, as if she'd been their lover, their father, their best friend, as if she'd inhabited their bodies and rode as a guest, or more likely for her personality as a host, for long enough to discern their drive, their fear, their passion, the building blocks of their lives. It wasn't really a surprise the way she effortlessly, almost lazily conjured the greatest minds into our bed. If anyone could do it, it would be her. I think she could raise the dead with her scarlet lip and lace and leather corset. Arguably, raising the dead was her profession, after all. But I'm starting at the end, and the beginning is much better. Another, the bartender, I think her name was Karen, acknowledged my order with a bob of her chin in that way that tells you someone's mind is elsewhere. I'm not offended. I'm a regular. She knows my drink. Plus, I do that at work all the time. I can't imagine mixing drinks is more mind-numbing than designing logos, but I couldn't imagine a lot of things back then. The music was too loud, as always, making conversation next to impossible. But I assume body language is heard with the eyes, and no one comes here to talk. It's not a classic dive bar, but it tries really hard, and the antiquated jukebox in the corner, the half-broken pinball machines, and the scratched pool table all help the illusion. Come to think of it, it's the definition of a dive bar. The only difference is the clientele. Is both mask and unveiling. My whole body jumps, and I almost take a header off my bar stool. She's standing so inside my personal space, I can smell her perfume. It's lilac. Excuse me? She's staring at my mouth to read my lips, and her hand is still spread open on my notebook in front of me. Her hands are small and square, her olive skin streaked with neon from corporate breweries and local IPAs. Her hair is a mane of chestnut ringlets that spill over her bare shoulders and brush the top of her strapless satin halter. She wears gold hoops and thin gold bangles. She pats my page. Writing, she leans into me, fully committing so her scarlet lips brush my ear when she speaks, is both mask and unveiling. A beat, a pause in the narrative she's weaving. Is it a novel? She hardly leans away then, as if she can absorb my response directly into her body. She seems to be made entirely of curves, lacking hard lines or sharp angles. God, was that the wrong first impression? Everything was a hard line with Hannah. But that night, she fit perfectly against my side, as if we were two pieces of the same thing. It's a grocery list, I tell her, matter of fact and mundane. I'm out of coffee. And I meet her eyes for the first time. I'm trying to be witty, maybe even debonair. I don't stand a chance, and I fall instantly, irreconcilably, into her copper penny gaze. Some emotion moves across her face. Is it surprise? Irritation? I'm watching her and not breathing. Does no one counter her? Does no one else play her game? She glances down at my notebook, clearly showing prose, then back up at me. And then she smiles. She smiles all the way up to her remarkable russet eyes, and I'm almost certain my fate is sealed. Her smile is predatory and precious in equal measure. Like a little girl about to rip the wings off a butterfly. except this little girl is all grown up and looking at me like a challenge she didn't know she wanted. I have coffee, she offers, making the game her own. Come home with me. I'm still not breathing. She's backlit, haloed in fiery tones like a fallen angel. I manage a shrug, my exterior nonchalant as my heart pounds in my chest. Why not? I murmur, her reading my lips. I've always hated shopping. And so, I go home with Hannah that first night. It's like I'm hovering above the city, suspended in the inky night above the skyscrapers and the streams of midnight traffic in the distance. There's the disconcerting juxtaposition of the entire tableau reflected upside down in the still, dark waters of the Puget Sound. And the sea and sky are as one. She does it again, catching me off guard as she appears beside me, sliding into my reality soundlessly. Brandy? It's not a question, and I take the offered snifter. We stand together for a moment, unmoving, the floor-to-ceiling windows radiating cold beside us, framing the black heavens and blacker water with their shared swath of city and cars. Her condo is Frank Lloyd Wright meets Denise Scott Brown, a masterclass in clean lines, pale walls, and glass and metal accents. I drink. Oh, she smiles like a secret between us. She drinks. This isn't off-the-shelf brandy from the corner store. I taste earthy apricot and savory fig, smooth honey, and the tang of green fennel. I'm not uneducated in the ways of a good cognac, but this one is beyond my ken. Delamain. She dispels my curiosity with the brand and my eyebrows lift. So much for playing it cool. I try to recover. Are you trying to impress me? And I lose my composure again as her smile broadens. Damn it, she keeps the upper hand so easily. She closes the space between us, leaving no room for anything but breathing in tandem. Hannah, she grants me, and the boon of knowing her name emboldens me. I kiss her. There is something arresting, alluring, and undeniably unknown about Hannah. She never answers an asked question and always answers the unspoken ones. She loves being a mind reader but despises banal inquisition. If I say to her, "What do you like?" she ignores me. But if I hesitate above her, wondering, she pushes me down her body and nestles my head between her thighs. This wordless interplay fascinates and frustrates me moment to moment, and it's one of the many reasons I'm never bored of her. She reveals nothing and everything. She keeps me in the dark and shines light on her deepest vulnerabilities, even in those first few days. I am liberated by the truth that after that first question, is it a novel? She never asks me another, ever. Sunlight slides across the wine-red sheets, turning Merlot into Chardonnay. I reach out one hand and feel her warmth already gone from the satin. It seems a shame and a loss. Her mere presence is a treasure to me. I roll over onto my back and stare past the ornate cherry posts of the bed to the eggshell white ceiling. When did she wake? I vaguely remember 6 a.m, or was it 7? Does she work? A condo like this with a view like that doesn't pay for itself. But what does she do? I find myself sorting through fantasies of her day job. I weigh each option against her predilections last night. The way she pulled me down on top of her, the sound of her voice, rich and honest, filling the room, her desires uninhibited, unbridled, playing with stereotypes. I imagine at work she's in power, but silenced by corporate politics. The burden of responsibility rests on her shoulders, Atlas carrying the world. It's amazing how wrong I was and how right. I should have gone home. At noon or 1 or certainly by 5, I should have gathered my clothes off the floor and the chaise lounge, stripped the bed, washed the sheets and the snifters. But the etiquette of the situation, what was the situation, was lost on me. I felt like I'd fallen down a rabbit's hole into another world where everything was surreal and enticing, where messages of drink me were met without hesitation and whispers of eat me were permission to feast. In short, I didn't want to leave. I rose from Hannah's bed only after the sun had poured across my entire body and then spilled away, luxuriating in memories of her that seemed gilded in dreams, as if I'd slipped in and out of the nether while I touched her, though I knew very well I'd been entirely present, perhaps more present than ever before. She had a plain cotton robe, black with a tie, hanging behind her bathroom door, and I wrapped it around myself like a cloak of invisibility. I noticed it was a men's medium, but instead of letting this bother me, I decided instead to be grateful it was my size. The stairs from her open loft bedroom were Gabon ebony, spiraling between chrome bars and glass panels. My eyes half closed as I descended, remembering kneeling at the base of the flight of stairs, her knees wrapped around my shoulders. My face had showed concern. That can't be comfortable, I thought, but she only made a low sound in the back of her throat, a plea for more action and less thought. I was famished, but also uninterested in food or drink. I smiled to myself. After Hannah, even ambrosia paled in comparison. I felt blessed. I felt chosen. I felt full, but I wanted more of her. Apparently, she knew a painter, someone who worked in acrylic, as throughout the condo were black and white abstracts. They evoked emotion and movement and reminded me of film noir until I caught one of them at the end of the hall, reflected in the mirror across the living room. I turned in slow motion, afraid I'd somehow scare the image away. Seen in reverse, the painting was far from abstract. It was a nude of Hannah, her body arcing back and revealed, a study in exposure and offering. She was beautiful, utterly vulnerable, but entirely in control. Finally, I made a cup of black coffee in the Italian percolator on the counter, then stood on the balcony for an hour, taking in the view in daylight. Work called. It was Monday, but I was off for 4 days so they could learn to live without me. I explored with my eyes, but never my hands. I imagined what everything felt like, but chose not to touch anything. I didn't want to overstep my bounds. Maybe just staying was too much already. I held on to the fact that she'd left no note, no missive of coffee's in the kitchen, help yourself, then help yourself out. Certainly she didn't want me to leave the front door unlocked. But there were no photos anywhere. On the tempered glass shelves inset to either side of the glass fireplace, there were small statues and curios from around the world. A Grecian Olympian wearing only a laurel crown as he readied a discus. A reclining Venus, resplendent with curves, stroking the head of a faun. A Nigerian Shirka in bronze, Cristo Redentor carved from Brazilian tiger wood. Was Hannah the traveler? Or perhaps her painter bestowed these gifts as symbols of longing when far away, or as souvenirs of times together. I searched for a unifying theme among the figurines, but came away only with global appreciation, a woman versed in the world. At sunset, umbers and golds seeped throughout the condo, and strategically placed mirrors and other reflective surfaces filled the space with molten light. I walked up the stairs to the loft to get above the almost liquid blaze. I wanted to take it all in without drowning or incinerating or both. When my hands wrapped around the brushed chrome railing was when the front door opened and Hannah came home. Except it wasn't Hannah. I really should have left. No one wants to come home after a long day at work to find their lover's one-night stand wearing your robe and drinking your coffee. But certainly, that was the predicament. I stared, frozen, not in fear, but in dread. What a truly unfortunate turn of events after such a remarkable evening. I admit I was without remorse, but that's the power she held over me, my willing subjectivity. He wore straight-legged Levi jeans, cuffed once over heavy motorcycle boots, worn and creased from actual use. Likewise, his riding gloves that he pulled off and tossed casually with belonging onto the pristine chrome and glass sideboard. The sound of his keys landing in the cut crystal bowl that a moment ago had been a basin of prisms filled with arcane light almost deafened me. His jacket, at least, he hung up in the hall closet, and when he emerged from the long hall, he shrugged out of his hoodie and shook out his chestnut curls. For just one moment, I thought, she has a brother. And that would have made everything so much easier. But that brief illusion evaporated as I watched Hannah pull off her white t-shirt and unbind her chest. She sat on the couch by the fireplace, nude from the waist up, her breasts small and full and chilled in the air. She leaned back, resting her arms along the back of the couch in both directions. At the curve of her hip, far above her low-slung jeans, rests the slender strap and D-ring of harness. My eyes move to her crotch. Hannah looks up at me, pinning me in place. Guess what I do for a living? Our first few moments together, I was breathless. Now I'm breathing so fast I feel faint. A dangerous proposition when standing at a loft railing, but seemingly not as dangerous as joining this stranger in the living room. I catch my own thought the moment after thinking it. I didn't think of Hannah as a stranger until she walked in with a cock. Something corporate. My voice sounds thin. There's a feeling in the pit of my stomach, a coiling, writhing thing made of all those ugly human emotions that we all pretend we don't harbor. I'm starting to hate myself a little bit. Wrong. She crosses one booted ankle over her knee, her eyes unrelenting. Her mannerisms, her gaze, even the confidence, the dominance in her tone, belie her bare breasts and cascading ringlets. She is a dichotomy, and I'm struggling with it. Come here. I absolutely don't move. I'm more likely to pitch forward over the rail than voluntarily walk down the stairs to her. Hannah shifts, uncrossing her legs. One hand falls against her thigh, almost cupping the impressive, though not unrealistic, package her button fly conceals. I start to see spots. I said, time has no meaning. It folds in on itself. Space and distance change their rules. I'm kissing her, buried inside her, listening to her whisper in my ear, even while her shouts fill the room. I might be losing my mind. Come here. And of course, I do. But not by choice. It becomes an autonomic response, my body overriding the cultural basis of my brain. My body overriding the cultural bias of my brain. Last night, I'd followed a dozen commands from her without hesitance, but now, Hannah doesn't get up. I loom over her, a substantial figure despite my borrowed robe, and she doesn't change her smile. If anything, nearer to her like this, I can see her amusement more clearly. She revels in my uncertainty and disconcert. She feeds off it, and I realize I want her to. I want her to swallow these feelings I'm having whole, consume them entirely, and leave me without shame or betrayal. I don't want to be that guy. Come closer. I stand between her open knees. I'm struggling with what to say. The past and present collide in the now, and the cacophony is painful. Oh God, am I speaking? What am I saying? Why am I speaking? I'm not into boys. Oh, I want to crawl into a hole and die. I literally wish in that moment that I didn't exist. And Hannah just wets her lips. You don't say. She's snide, but somehow not unkind. I think because of the passion and patience on her face as she leans forward, running her hands up my bare thighs, finding me beneath the robe, her robe, and holding me in both her hands. She seems curious and amused to find me unaroused. Hannah exhales and stands, moving me aside with her own body, but only enough to make room for her. Lucky for you, she tells me, her hands already at her jeans. I'm not a boy at night. And deftly, with the slick sounds of denim and cotton, her belt, then her jeans, then her boxer briefs hit the hardwood floor. Finally, she's standing almost nude before me, and I feel like I should do something, anything to prove I'm not some unenlightened Neanderthal who blunders through life in binary absolutes. I want to drop my gaze and look at her equipment, maybe even reach out and touch her, but instead, I just drop my robe. Hannah gives me her patient smile again. She steps against me so our bodies touch almost everywhere at once, and then reaches down between us and unbuckles her harness. Leather and silicone join our clothes on the floor, and she kisses me soft and sweet, as if I'm delicate, but now I'm growing hard against her, and she's still smiling. Let's get high. She walks away from me, and I look down. It's like he melted on the floor, and she rose from his demise. I look back up at her. She has a great ass. She turns at the top of the stairs, looking down at me. It's been a long day. Her voice is steady and sure, but I imagine a weariness behind it. Come upstairs and fuck me. And I do as the lady commands. She's leaning back against pillows, the bed sheets tangled, as thoroughly under the influence as she had been under me an hour before. It's somewhere past midnight, but nowhere near dawn, and I'm captivated by her entirely. I think I'm most afraid of onism, the looming boredom of being forced to be just one person, just one body. I want to understand her. She's so beautiful, like looking at a tapestry or a painting. I've known her for 24 hours, and she is art to me. I realized when I was 16, she pauses to take a deep, slow draw from her thick blunt. I have no idea what strain it is, but it tastes and smells like mown grass with lilac beneath After 2 hits, I can fold time like origami. Hannah continues. That women would pay me to fuck them. As a boy, I'm trying to comprehend. And having no sense of self or gravity or direction isn't helping me. Or maybe it's exactly what I need. Not at first. Hannah passes me the joint and I take it because I feel on thin ice, barely allowed in or worthy of her presence. But that became my angle. She laughs a little. My special niche. Why don't they just... I lose my ability for words because my 3rd hit has left me floating somewhere near the vaulted ceiling, looking down at both of us. If this is what death feels like, it's not half bad. Hire a real boy. She finishes my sentence as a statement and laughs, but I'm not sure if her mirth is spurred by my inability to handle my THC or her own Pinocchio reference. She pins me with a gaze so direct and sensual that I'm back in my body with a snap that's positively audible. Endurance, concentration, focus, knowledge, novelty, poetry. There are things women can say to each other that a man never will. I am almost completely mute. I am unable to make any sound, only able to want her so utterly. One hand falls to cover myself as if, lying naked in her bed, I can hide anything from her. And then it happens. Time folds in on itself like a paper crane, and the present moment becomes the past and 100 futures repeating just the same. That young man coming into the condo, dropping his keys in the crystal bowl, throwing his jacket on the couch. I lean over the bed and throw up. Alcoholism is realizing the smallness of your own single perspective. It wasn't a state of being I discovered until many, many years later, when politics and world events turned the world upside down and pink. It knocked the wind out of me. My ignorance, my bigotry, my loss. Fate or chance or some nameless gods, amused by my infinite stupidity, had handed me my soulmate, and I had thrown up on her hardwood floor. And mine wasn't a graceful exit. There were no insults slung, though I deserved them. No questions of my own inadequacies as a man, if I was so easily threatened by a girl wearing a dick. I didn't even have the self-respect to wipe off my face and slink away. Nope. I stayed. I stayed the 4 days I had off that week. Hannah left in the morning while I was still naked in her bed, exhausted from pot and cognac and the best sex I'd ever had in my life. And when I woke, I'd wander her home, drink more, admire the view, and conveniently be in the shower when she came home as a boy. Liberosis is the sincere desire to care less. I wish I could say I prayed or wished or bargained with those merciless gods to care less about something that, 20 years later, seems trivial and even petty. Such a small thing, after all. I mean, maybe 8 or 10 inches. When I vomited that second night, Hannah actually laughed at me, and her laughter was nothing but kind. "It's okay, Michael," she assured me as she helped me into the bathroom, cleaned my face like a mother and child, gave me a toothbrush and mouthwash. "You don't have to keep pace with me." She had no idea how much of a problem that was. I suppose that's why I decided to write about this, to write my one true sentence, because I created the problem where there was only perfection. And Hannah, if you read this somewhere, somehow, someday, please know, I was an idiot. I could have been stronger. I should have returned your calls. I should have gone back to that dive bar and found you again. I should have gotten over my damn self and seen you for everything you were, a goddess, a god, a creature made of mercury, as fluid as only quicksilver can be. I loved Hannah, but only at night, and that was my mistake. For me, Trinity began as a project where gender was going to be explored. I pitched the idea of the Trinity Project to the senior editor of Blue Forge Press, my wife, Brienne DiMarco. And I pitch ideas all the time. And I know Brienne will tell me if an idea isn't viable. I pitched it as a project where 9 authors from all walks of life would be given a prompt, and I would be one of the authors, and everyone would write about them, but because there would be men in this pool of authors and women in this pool of authors and different sexualities in this pool of authors and even non-binary folks in this pool of authors, that it would be really cool. It would be like, let's see how gender explores the same prompt. And it wasn't even 4 months in that I realized that gender has no bearing on the creative mind and how we explore these prompts. But gender was a big thing for me with this first story, and with actually several of my stories in my 12 stories that I wrote for Trinity. When I was first starting my writing career, I wrote exclusively in the third person. And then I took almost a 3-decade hiatus from writing prose and poetry to have 2 amazing children. Just the process of thinking about becoming an adult and setting everything up. My eldest turns 21 at the end of 2020, so the children were only actually present for 20 years of that 30-year hiatus, but gender, I think, influenced so many of my Trinity stories because, again, it was there at that flashpoint moment, but especially this one, because I thought, well, the title's right there, my name's right there, and it's in first person, so many readers are going to assume that the narrator is female. And I've even had people read the story and then talk to me about it and even come to the end not picking up on any of the cues in the beginning or any of what I think are very blatant reveals and tells near the end, that actually the narrator in this story is male. He's a man named Michael. I've also had people very boldly, but I love this, and this is why I do consider, I love the new heart of Trinity, the truth of Trinity, the creative Trinity. It's the writer, the story, the reader. I have had people read my work and ask me things that are far more bold than my closest friends have ever asked me. And with this particular story, the question was, are you Michael or are you Hannah? And when I first was asked that question, I was actually stunned to silence. I am someone who loves to hear myself talk, so being stunned to silence is pretty rare for me. And my honest answer to that was, well, I'm a little bit of both. There are a lot of true events that I took from my own life to craft this story. But I'm also so much Michael. I have had those feelings of wanting to be better, wanting to not have something bother me that bothers me, that as an enlightened, evolved woman in her the later half of her 40s, I should be beyond this. I should be past these little bigotries in terms of gender and sexuality and such and so. And to have to recognize, wow, I'm not, and to strive to be a better person, because Well, may all of us strive every day to be a better human being, and not just in word, but in actions. So I think I was really glad that this story was the first story that I was inspired to write, that one of the prompts was the flashpoint for me to craft. When you say, well, what about the prompt? I think for me, the part that spoke the most to me was the night was bleak and biting, like only the middle of the winter can be, and the sky cluttered with stars was wide and cloudless. There was something just about that, about talking about the night, but then talking about the sky. And for me, that image of, if you're ever in West Seattle, driving along Alki, and you look across at the Seattle skyline, the downtown Seattle skyline, it's perfectly duplicated in the waters of the Puget Sound that lie between Alki Beach and Alki Drive and downtown Seattle in the waterfront. So there's the waterfront, and there's the buildings, and then there's the freeway beyond, and all of that is reflected in the Puget Sound if you can get up high enough. So I guess you can't just drive along Alki, but you can see the shimmering while driving along Alki. My maternal grandparents had a condominium when I was a little girl that was right on Alki. So it was high up and it looked down on the Puget Sound. And there was something about that. There was a duplicate of the city in that inky black of the Puget Sound, just like the city was painted in this completely new way at night against the ink black of the sky. And for some reason, that prompt it triggered that memory for me, and how much I loved that view, standing out on their chrome and glass balcony, which at first I could sit on the balcony concrete. It was actually stone, the balcony floor base, and look through the glass. And then that feeling of, at first I could rest my chin on the railing, and then I grew a little bit more, not much, but a little bit more, and then I could comfortably stand with my hands, my arms, my forearms on the railing. I think that the revision that I remember making, it was throwing my beta readers, so to speak, and I think it was throwing myself as well, was initially I had said the name of the bar because I had based the bar on a real bar that I had actually done a book reading at in Boston, and the bar is no longer in business, and as a kind of an homage to the bar, I had named the bar the same thing. But it seemed to give people the impression that it was a gay bar. And I already knew that because my first name is Jennifer, which is a classically female name, and it was written in first person, and my name would appear at the top of the story, people were already going to assume, most likely, that the narrator was a woman. And I didn't want to further stack the deck in that direction. I wasn't trying to mislead the viewer. I was just trying to make gender an afterthought, because to Michael, gender was an afterthought. It wasn't something he ever considered. He was a straight man, and there you go. So I wanted to kind of get inside his mind. This is not something, when he met Hannah, that he had ever thought about, and that was important to me. I think that I am incredibly lucky to be married to the best editor on the planet. And the reason I say that is she works with almost 100 authors directly. All of us have such phenomenally different voices. And to take it a step further, she herself is a writer, and she has a voice that's totally different from the people that she works with. And Brianne has this incredible ability to not lessen or weaken, not to dilute the voice of a writer. She will blue pencil edit. She will find all those, the typos and the grammar and all that kind of stuff that she possibly can as a single human being, But when it comes to red pencil, she will help make sure a story is paced correctly, but she will never diminish the voice of the writer. I've never known someone who can do that. And personally, I think it's because, as Brienne actually says, she learned to read before she remembers learning to read. She just knew to read. She knew how to read. And she is not just a voracious reader, but an incredibly eclectic reader. And I think having all of those different voices in her head and loving each of them in such different ways, from I hope I'm saying the names of these authors right, from Ellen Hopkins to Tolkien, these incredibly different voices, and valuing and appreciating all of them, I feel that she values and appreciates us as authors, all of us here in Trinity and all of us signed by Blue Forge Press. So that is my January Trinity story. I hope I get to share other stories with you guys. If you have any questions, if there's a comment section or something like that, leave them in the comment section for me. Or you can even write to blueforgepress@gmail.com, and you can ask Brianna a question, or you can say, hey, I've got a question for Jennifer DiMarco, one of the Trinity authors, or any of the Trinity authors. So that is a cool way to reach out to us, and you will hear from us. We actually do write our readers back. Maybe if I stop writing for a minute and stop working for a minute, and maybe I'll get my website back up, and then you guys can reach out to me there. But there's my January sharing time, show and tell for Trinity. Thanks, you guys.